more regulations in place, just as we did, although many argue, after the horse had bolted with social media for teenagers. Let's ask someone who casts her learned eye over all of this, Dr. Julia Coffey. Julia is an Associate Professor of Sociology at the Uni of Newcastle. She's been looking into this and she's joining us now. G'day, Julia. How are you?
Good, thanks. Good morning.
First of all, can you explain what is an AI chatbot?
Sure. So this particular chatbot is enabled in family accounts for Google. So it's a particular program. And basically you can ask Gemini any question you like. It's basically like a Google search, but the chatbot will answer as though they're a human.
Oh.
So yeah, so it's basically like an unfiltered, basically Google search, but voice activated using your voice. And obviously that already starts sort of raising some red flags because, an unfiltered Google search is not something we would generally encourage our children to use without guardrails on it. And that's precisely what this is. So even though Google is saying, that you can turn on particular features that will limit the kind of information that comes through, there's, all of these things rely on particular buttons and settings to be pressed, and many people will not be aware that it is not unfiltered. One of the things that I've really been struck by looking at this over the last few days is how little information there actually is about it from Google. There's the same lines about it that are being quoted everywhere around. This information may not be accurate. Parents need to check. And that's kind of it. That's about all we've been given by Google about how it works and how they're anticipating children will use it. And I think that speaks volumes because it really tells us that Google see children as a market. That they're going to be, the next generation of Google users, but they're deliberately targeting here, and that's part of a broader pattern with the larger social media and all kinds of different companies using AI as a way to draw children in.
How does Google justify that if they are ostensibly going along with that old marketing adage of get them young and you keep them for life? How are they justifying it, particularly to parents and to regulators for that matter, one imagines, saying, oh no, this is a fantastic tool for the young? What's their justification for aiming this at the young?
Well, I don't really want to talk to their spin. I know they would say things, though, about it being, giving children access to information and how knowledge is power and all that kinds of things. But I guess the main point is that they're not being asked by anyone to justify or, how this could possibly be ethical or justifiable beyond their own desires to generate profit, basically. So one of the main things that I've seen others in this space discuss in the conversation and on other articles in the ABC is about how this exposes a lack of regulation. It is being worked on at the moment in Australia through the Digital Duty of Care legislation, which was released last week and is still being worked on. That aims to rewrite the rules for social media companies and giants like Google to actually force them to account for the impacts of their products and the impacts of their technologies, and to actually build in prevention models from the beginning, which are clearly not being given much, I don't think they're credible at all at the moment, particularly in terms of the implications for AI chatbots for children. We're being forced to kind of make it up and anticipate what they might be rather than Google actually having thought through what they might be and, building in prevention for these significant risks.
Well, Julia, if the companies aren't taking that into account and building that in, how strong do you believe regulators, governments should be? And as we did last year, although, as I say, to many it was after the horse had bolted, that regulations are put in place and bans in effect for teens and social media. Do we need to look at something like that? Do we need to look to our policymakers, our lawmakers, for something like that? Or, again, has the horse bolted?
Well, the great irony of all of this is that, of course, this AI chatbot would not be banned or is not banned under the social media ban that will be going through Parliament in the next few weeks. It is a system, that particular policy it does not put nearly enough responsibility on the companies. it puts the responsibility on children and excludes them from forms of social media when, of course, it doesn't ban YouTube and other things. So I think it's a wholly, inadequate policy, as many other social media scholars have also pointed out. But the digital duty of care is more like what's happening in the EU, for example, where in the last week, the Commission over there has launched formal proceedings against TikTok under the Digital Services Act. So that is sort of specifically looking at the foreseeable negative effects they see stemming from the design of TikTok, the use of algorithms, the ways that it can stimulate rabbit hole effects, its lack of transparency, its impacts on mental well-being, and the basically inability or the inconsideration of the rights of the child in that space. So that sort of code is what the digital duty of care in Australia is looking at, to emulate formal systems to actually ask companies to account for these things. It is a bit backwards. It is happening sort of as the horse has bolted or after, as you said. But it's at the moment nothing is happening in this space. These things are just being launched and we're having to guess what the impacts might be and then reverse engineer, try to figure out how to put it back. And it can't be put back once it's out.
And we know how tricky that all is. Finally, what would your advice be to parents, grandparents, carers who know that their kids understand and know the ways and byways of technology far better than them in most cases? How do you advise them to keep their kids safe as they launch into this brave new world and are tempted, as it were, to try this out, this AI chatbot?
Well, I mean, I think adults need is probably more education about how AI works and what it does, because it's really difficult for these owners to be put back on parents to educate children about it, because there's so little known, it's moving so quickly. But I would say be highly suspicious of information you get from AI chatbots. It is not giving you contextual information most of the time. It's based on sort of parroted information that is devoid of meaning and context very often, or it's just based on incorrect information, because AI is only as good as the information it has, and often it just doesn't have what it needs. Also, we know that the information, or so-called information, is highly biased. It has all kinds of inequalities and biases baked into it, and that it reproduces this information as though it is scientifically accurate. And it often absolutely is not, and is really harmful and damaging in that space. So highly suspicious. I would avoid using it.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, there's the bottom line there. Avoid using it.
Yeah.
Julia Coffey from the University of Newcastle, thank you for sharing your knowledge and for giving us that warning this morning about what is coming our way.
No problem.
Good on you.